My name is Chrissie, and I've been attending Life Church since I got married in 2011. You know, I'm 33 now, but this is a story from when I was 18. I remember finding out I was pregnant, and what do you do when you feel hopeless? What do you do when you don't know what to do? And that's anything. You get scrappy. You just start scraping for any semblance of control, any semblance of knowing what to expect next. And so for me in that moment, the only thing I could think of to bring a sense of control to how out of control I felt was to end my pregnancy. I went to the clinic. I remember telling them that I wanted an abortion. This is what I want. Who do I need to talk to? Where do I need to go? What do I need to do? And eventually, it was the same day, but I ended up in a back room in this clinic. It was an ultrasound room. They were confirming the pregnancy and they were confirming how far along I was. And so I wanted to see the ultrasound. She wasn't going to show me at first, but I talked her into it. And she turned it around and showed me. She's like, yeah, there's the head right there. It was a little circle. There's the body. There's a little body. And it almost looked like a blinking light. It was just like a tiny little throbbing part. And I asked her, what's that? And she said, that's the heartbeat. And all of my history with God in that moment, I couldn't do it. I wish I could say that in that moment, we watch Disney movies and somebody flicks a wand or somebody flips a switch or something magical happens and everything's okay. And nothing magical happened and everything was not okay. It was still very much not okay. I was still not okay. I still was hopeless. I still had no options. I still didn't know what I was going to do. But I just knew that I couldn't do that. I did remember, though, that when I was 11, I learned about an adoption agency out of Tupelo, Mississippi called New Beginnings. And I reached out to them and they said, yes, you can make an adoption plan. We'll work with you. And so they flew me out to Mississippi and I lived with them from the point I was 4 months pregnant until my son was born. And it was a healing season. I was away from the chaos of home. I was away from the danger that I was in. I was in a safe place. And you know, you finally get to sit in a safe place and you get to process things and you get to think. And I honestly, it comes down to options. One option was God. I as crazy as it sounds, I still really loved God and still really believed God loved me. And even in that moment, I had this feeling that if I have an abortion, God will forgive me. He's not going to stop loving me. He's going to forgive me. He's good, and I'm going to depend on that. Because the other option was having a baby and admitting to people that I'm pregnant and disappointing my pastors, disappointing my parents, having them be angry at me, and they're never going to forgive me. And it seemed like a simple choice. It wasn't an easy one. A friend of mine once said, abortion is easy on everybody else except the mother. And she's absolutely right about that. Sorry if I'm having a moment. But when you're in a situation like that, there are no easy decisions. So I was expecting a boy and I was due September 11th. And then it was late August. And I remember there was a situation that had come up and I was feeling really discouraged. I was kind of stressed out, and two different people who didn't know each other, hadn't talked to each other, both gave me some advice and encouragement. And they said, Chrissie, all things work together for good to those who love God and those who are called according to his purpose. I did find it interesting because it was two people that hadn't talked to each other at all. And so that was on a Sunday. Well, that Tuesday, I went into labor early and had my son, they were wrapping him up and doing whatever they do. And so while they're cleaning him up, Renee my friend Renee, she worked at New Beginnings at the time. She was in labor and delivery with me. And so while they were wrapping him up, she said, I just love that he was born today. That's so special because of Romans 8:28. And it was August 28th. And so I said, well, what's Romans 8:28? And she was like, you know, all things work together for good to those who love God and those who are called according to his purpose. And it was like a hug from God, like, hey, it really is gonna be okay. And you keep loving me, you keep leaning in, because throughout that summer, I had just started to lean into who God was for the first time and really surrendered my life to him. But it's one thing to surrender your life to him in a comfortable environment where there's singing and there's worship music and everybody's encouraging you to give your life to him. That's one thing, to surrender your life to him. And it's important. It's such an important step. But then there's living it out, and there's surrender. And adoption is the epitome of surrender. You're surrendering your baby into a family that you know is going to be a gift to your child. I felt like they were my gift to him. I wanted to give him a mom and a dad who loved each other. I wanted to give him a peaceful home with no fighting. I wanted to give him stability. I wanted to give him his own room and all the little things that I couldn't if I had chosen to parent him, but that I could give him through adoption. It really was surrender. I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know if he'd ever want to meet me when he's older. I didn't know if I would ever get to see him again. I just trusting God in that moment. And so after, it was, well, what now? And I thought I knew what I wanted to do with my life. I thought I wanted to be a pilot. I had already started studying, but was I willing to surrender that? And so I decided to take a brief moment to visit my grandparents in Texas, and I lived with my granddad for 4 years. And then while I was there, I met a guy in Houston. I know I already said this, but I visited Life Church with my friend. She actually was coming to see a guy. Anyway, it's all about guys when you're 20. Anyway, so we came out and I met him and fell pretty hard, and came out here and we got married, and I lived in Houston. And just when I was getting in a groove, an opportunity came up for a job that I didn't know I wanted, but I felt led to. And so I stepped into that job, and there have been God has blessed it so much. That's a whole other thing, but God has blessed it so much. I also, side note, had the opportunity to serve on the board of directors for New Beginnings for about 7 years. And like that, it's like God has just given me these little gifts along the way. It's like just reminding me that all things really are working out for my good. And the first one was being invited to serve on the board of directors for the very adoption agency that I went through for my own adoption plan. He's just gone before me. It just step 2, 3 ahead of me, and he just lays the way. If I'm willing to give up my plan, if I'm willing to give up control, if I'm willing to not try to fix things, and if I'm willing to just stay in his presence and stay in a spirit of worship and just pay attention to God and really get to know him, and keep asking, like, God, I want more of you. He requires more of me. It's in Luke where Jesus says, if you're gonna follow me, you have to count the cost, because there's not a builder who starts building a house and doesn't count the cost first. So if you're gonna follow me, count the cost, because it's gonna cost you everything. But what I get in return is I get every part of Jesus. He doesn't withhold anything. I want to share the latest good thing, the latest reminder that all things truly do work together for good. 2 days before you asked me to share this story, I got a call from New Beginnings, and I got a call from the lady who had handled my case 15 years ago, and she said, we caught up for a little bit, and then she said, well, Chrissy, I have something interesting to run by you. She said, my son's adoptive parents, they reached out to New Beginnings and they asked, hey, we are redoing our will right now. And in the event that something happens to both of us while our son is still a minor, we were wondering if Elvin and Chrissy might be willing to be his guardian and to be his godparents and be willing to let him live with them. And I said, well, I'm never going to say no to that. And she said, well, do you want to check with Elvin and talk to him? I said, no, he's never going to say no. No, it's a yes. Yes. I was like, I'll confirm with him. If that makes you feel better, I will confirm with him. And she said yes, and I did, and he said yes too. But when I surrendered him, I never expected God to give him back to me. And hopefully this never actually happens, but I just can't believe that not only, I didn't know if he'd ever even want to meet me. And now, like, I get to be his godmother. All things work together for good. They're still working. Things are still moving. There's no bow to tie this story with because, again, we're still living it. But you can't convince me that if I give everything to God, that he's not going to give it all back. He's not going to give all of himself to me. He continues to give all of himself to me. I'm never going to stop needing him, but I'm always going to be fully satisfied by him. He's still healing me, and yet in his presence, I'm already healed. And there's still more growing to do. There's still more learning to do, but he is whole. And when I step into his presence, so am I. He shares his wholeness with me. He shares his healing with me. He is my healer. He is my wholeness. In his presence, I'm already healed. I'm already whole because he doesn't withhold anything from me.